Hi, welcome to Wellspring on the Air. I'm Tova, president and co-founder of Wellspring Counseling, and today we are going to be talking about a very difficult subject, which is abuse, physical and sexual abuse. We also will have a follow-up show talking about emotional and spiritual and verbal abuse. But for this show today, we're going to talk about two hard subjects, physical and sexual abuse. And with me on our show today, I have two therapists also at Wellspring. First, we have Nicole. Hi, Nicole.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tova.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've been at Wellspring for about 4 years. I've been licensed 12, and I am married with 2 kids, and I love what I do. Thanks.
And you're good at it. And then we also have Kaara with us today. Hi, Kaara.
Hi, Tova.
Tell us about yourself.
Yes, so I started working at Wellspring in 2016 and then moved away in 2018. And so I'm actually tuning in from Atlanta, Georgia. And so it's great to be back with Wellspring virtually. So I do EMDR and couples work with my clients.
That's great. And we're so happy to have you back now that we're doing so much remote. We realized we could hire back old therapists who we hated to see go. And so here you are. And that's awesome. It's awesome. All right. So we're going to talk about this topic of abuse. So before we dive in, let's just talk about the word abuse. I think it's kind of tossed around some in our society today. Oh, you're being abusive, but as clinicians and where we have legal mandates about abuse and things like that, let's just talk about what is abuse?
Yep.
So there's different types, but in general, it's really an improper use and treatment of a person. So you're unfairly being treated to gain some sort of benefit. It could be violence. It could be through words, sexual acts, verbal, right?
Yeah. And there's when it comes to abuse, the person who is abusing someone is trying to gain power and control over the other person. So whether they're using words or actions, physical actions, their motive is to gain power.
So it's abusive if they're using power. And I actually think if we go back to the word, it is an abuse of power. It helps us realize why we use the word abuse. We have power, some sort of differential with somebody. And it could be age, it could be size, it could be the power of authority. So of people in a boss, a teacher, a coach. So there's someone with some sort of power differential who uses that differential for their own selfish gain at the expense of somebody else. So there's nothing wrong with great use of power. You influence people to do good things, but when you use your power to get something for yourself and it distinctly costs something to somebody else, you have abused your power and it's abusive, right?
Yes, absolutely. It damages somebody else. Yes.
At somebody else's expense. So people who are just saying a harsh word in a state of anger between 2 8th grade girls, that's not necessarily abuse. That's just nastiness. It's being mean. It's,
right.
But if one of those girls is the ringleader of the in crowd and she's the most popular girl there and she is harassing on a regular basis somebody else who's at a very low power differential in their peers for a variety of reasons, and they do it on an ongoing basis, that would be bullying, and that would actually be somewhat abusive because there is like a little power thing happening. Mm-hmm. So to take it there. But let's talk about physical abuse first, and let's talk about what constitutes physical abuse legally. When do I have to report abuse? What is that?
Right. So with physical abuse, in Florida, because I can speak to what the law is in Florida, because in every state it's a little bit different, but I think this, generally speaking, it can apply to a lot of our listeners who are outside of the state of Florida as well. But in Florida, I feel like the definition of abuse is a little bit limited in terms of how we may clinically define abuse. But for the purposes of the law, is if someone, especially, and we're talking physical abuse. So physical abuse can happen to a child and it can happen to an adult. So in the context of children, we are supposed to report if anybody who suspects that a child is being physically abused or neglected has to report that, has to make that report. And then there are mandated professions that we fall under that we naturally know that we have to report for those things. So according to the law, is you can call the Florida Abuse Hotline if a child is in immediate danger and that call needs to be received right away. That you can call the Florida hotline, and most states have a hotline number that you can look up and call. And for physical abuse, this would look like, I mean, there's just so many things under here, right? with physical abuse. But for physical abuse, it'll be like if you suspect, you see burn marks, you see physical marks on their skin. Yeah. Those are the things that you can see, but there's a lot of things that you don't see that a child might be still, that kind of falls under banner of physical abuse, and neglect falls under that as well, because that's something that you may not see. But if a child is being left home alone without supervision and they are young children, that is something that you may not see the abuse, but the fact that they are in an environment where there's not supervision, or they may be exposed to their parents being abused. They may be exposed to drugs, alcohol, and violence in their home. And even that is a form of abuse, you know, when we consider children.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's good. And then that also applies very similarly to the elderly. So those are also reportable mandates, right? That if they are being neglected, so any of the physical safety, their food, their shelter, their physical care, and that's true for children and or even someone who's handicapped, people who are dependent on somebody else for their care, and so physically dependent. So all of that falls under physical abuse.
Yes, and educational neglect also. If kids are not going to school, that's also considered a physical abuse. Yeah. And I do want to say one thing regarding mandated reporting. We are all mandated reporters, every single one of us. The difference regarding reporting is that if you're not in a profession that's required to report, right, a mandated profession, you do not have to say your name. You're an anonymous reporter. If you are under a profession, you do need to say your name. So I just want to say that because, you know, I think it's important for our audience to know that if you see something, you can call the hotline and you do not have to say who you are.
If you see it, say it.
Yes.
Right?
Amen. Yes.
It's not our job to be for sure if it's abuse. It's our job if we suspect,
right,
to go ahead and make the call.
It's our job to say we suspect. It's their job to determine and interview and make sure that something's happening and if there is a need for intervention. And we just need to let go of that process. We kind of want to go to the outcome before we report, and we need to not. We need to just let go of that. That's not our job. Our job is to speak when we see things of concern. So for adults who are assaulted, now that's different, right? That's legally that physical abuse for an adult who is assaulted, hit, battered, that kind of thing. It comes under the word assault and battery, you know, that kind of thing. It's a little bit different, but it is still a crime.
Yes.
Yeah, it's still illegal. All right, so let's talk. Either of you, I think, had some statistics about domestic violence, which means that's violence within the home. So what do you have on that?
Yes, I would like to talk a little bit about domestic violence and the physical abuse for adults, right? And it's also called intimate partner violence as well. So sometimes we can look it up under that name. And one of the things we tend to think when people hear domestic violence is that we automatically think women. We automatically think women are the ones being abused by men. And while it is true that is the majority, that women do tend to be the majority, domestic violence or intimate partner violence does not discriminate with age, race, sex, religion, or gender. right?
Or socioeconomic
Or
levels.
exactly, or socioeconomic.
We think it may happen among the poor, and
right.
but it may happen in the rich too, and be very well covered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here are some statistics about intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men aged 18 and older in the United States have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that statistic. That's
Yeah.
profound.
So think about it. If you are in a community, you're in school, you are sitting at church, 1 in 4 and 1 in 7, right?
Wow.
How many times are we in a gathering with 10 or more people?
Right.
And we will never, ever, ever suspect. And that's the thing about any type of abuse. We may not know what's going on behind closed doors because everyone may present themselves looking like a put together family. And so sometimes even in our church communities, we may think this is not going to happen in our faith community, not us, and we are not immune.
No,
we are not immune to that. Another one is the murder rate. On average, more than 3 women a day are murdered by their husbands or boyfriends in the United States.
Wow. And
so a lot of this happens with weapons, with guns. A lot of the murder, how they are killed. And nearly 1 in 4 women in the United States reports experiencing violence by a current or former spouse, which we talked about. And Nicole, this would come up in your piece as well, but there were 248,000 rapes or sexual assaults in the United States in 2007, more than 500 per day. And when we think about that, like per day, across the United States, these numbers are staggering.
Incredible.
Well, we're going to move on here to sexual abuse in just a second, but what are some of the key things we want the listener here today to hear about the idea of physical abuse? One is that it happens more than we think. You just made that profoundly true. It happens. And it happens in homes where we don't notice or may be really surprised. I've done work with several clients who were from very wealthy homes with, in this case, fathers who were highly acclaimed professionals in their fields, and no one ever knew that these men were raised in those kind of homes where they were mothers and they themselves were physically beaten on a regular basis. It's just shocking. So, all right, so it's prevalent, but what else do we want our listener to hear?
For physical abuse?
Yeah. What's important? Report was the other thing, so let's do that.
Yes. So I would say that one of the things that anyone who is being abused, I think one of the things that you need to be aware of is that it's not okay to show love. Like sometimes when we grow up in an abusive environment as kids, we may not know what love looks like because we have not seen healthy love displayed to us. And so when we become adults, if we do not heal our traumas, if we do not work on becoming a better us, we will inherently transfer it to our partners and our kids.
Because we think it's normal.
That's what we know. That's what we know.
I think that's really true. And I think a lot of women are attracted to men who are abusive originally because it looks like love at the beginning.
Yes.
Very possessive means like I really love you so much, I want to be with you every moment. And he's so interested in every detail of my life, when really they're on that verge of stalking, or it's a control issue for the man, but it feels like engagement, women just longing to be noticed and attended to. So it feels like a good power, like a real man. This feels like a real man, and it's very attractive. But if it's not really about loving you with my power, but taking advantage of you with my power, then it turns very quickly from a real man, good power, to abuse.
Yes. And I think culturally too, like that comes into play with, we see in a lot of Hispanic cultures, Black culture, there's this thing of, having this we call it macho man in Trinidad, where it's like, that's like the good thing, and so part of that is that idea of possessiveness. And so you're almost cultured into thinking this is what love is. Love is when my man is possessive and he's jealous, that's a good thing. And you almost think something is wrong with you if your man is not jealous, because that's the cultural mindset that we have been, unfortunately, some of us have been,
generationally. Yeah.
Well, and so it's just typical of Satan to pervert what's good. So God is a jealous God. There is good love where we possess and we care so much about, and we want loyalty because there's this committed relationship. That's a beautiful thing. But when instead it's, I'm going to, control your life. You can't have friends anymore. You can't talk to your family, because if you start talking to your friends and your family, you're going to tell them what a jerk I'm being. So I'm going to start isolating you, and it looks like possession, but really it's I've got to isolate you. In order to sustain a system of abuse, you have to isolate your victim from talking to people, from having friends, from having family, from feedback that would say that's not love, that's dangerous, and so they begin to isolate, they begin to control the money, control the access to things. So this whole power and control wheel, right, where I keep you here because you're now financially dependent on me, and you don't get to talk to anybody else, and I control your job, and then I make you feel bad when you come home, so I kind of make you work at pleasing me. Some of those dynamics, which are actually a whole nother show, right?
Yes.
The manipulation piece. Yeah.
What sustains this. So look, we're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll be right back. And so if you want to hear more, we're going to go talk about sexual abuse. So just stay with us, and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Wellspring on the Air. Today we are talking about physical and sexual abuse, and I have with me today Nicole and Kaara. And if you are just joining our show, then you can find us on your favorite podcast channel, Wellspring on the Air, or you can find us on our website, wellspringmiami.org. Go to our blog, search in abuse, and you'll find this podcast, and you can hear the beginning of it. But we've been talking about physical abuse. Kaara has helped us hear a few shocking statistics and realize this is prevalent. Nicole's told us we need to report, and we recognize there are some dynamics that sustain this kind of abuse. But let's talk about sexual abuse. Nicole, I think you have some statistics for us.
So at first I would like to say the definition of what sexual abuse is. So the infliction of sexual contact upon a person by forcible compulsion. Okay, so it's obviously forced. And then there's that piece of engaging in sexual contact with a person who is below a specific age, or who is incapable of giving consent because of age or mental or physical incapacity. Okay, so that's really the definition of sexual abuse. We have sexual abuse and we have sexual battery. They're two different things. When we talk about sexual abuse, most of the time we are talking about children. Okay, we are talking about below the age of 18 years old. Here in Florida, that is the age of consent. Okay, so we are talking about when somebody is forcing a child, somebody under the age of 18, to do something sexual, or to view something sexual, or to touch them in a sexual manner. Okay, so it's not only that there is penetration, if you will, but there is the touching of, or the watching of pornography forcefully. Okay, so that's a lot to kind of process through there.
So it is children, but it's also, you said, people who can't consent because they're incapacitated by age, by health, by intoxication, by anything like that. So those things also fall in that category. And then you were going to say sexual battery is?
So sexual battery means oral, anal, or vaginal penetration by or union with the sexual organ of another, or by an object. Okay. That does not include the act of any medical procedure. So that is sexual battery.
Okay, well, that was graphic, but thank you.
I know. Sorry.
That's the way it is.
Right? It is what it is.
It's a lot more graphic when it really happens.
And I do want to say some statistics on this, because this sexual battery is something that happens so much. Okay, out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 999 will walk free. Okay,
Wow.
1,000 sexual assaults, 995 perpetrators will walk free. All
Wow.
right. So there's not a lot of reporting on this. People do not feel comfortable, safe, able to say this happened to me. You know, they just don't feel that it's the right, not right thing to do, but safe enough to go to the report, to report this to the police.
Well, they know that they're going to be grilled on why didn't they stop it? How did they do it? Maybe they wanted it. Maybe they have some ambivalence. You know, if I hadn't gone to that party, if I hadn't done this, if I hadn't been drinking, you know, they feel, and the abusers typically will make them feel responsible.
Like some sort of guilt. Yeah. Some sort of responsibility. And that's a problem because
It's a big problem.
It is, because if you did not consent to it, and if you were intoxicated, you are not, you know, it's not okay. You know, you were abused, you were assaulted, you were raped, however you want to, you know, say it.
I do think that the laws have changed to be more protective of the victims in terms of how they have to testify. And I want to say that to encourage people to go ahead and trust the system to guide you through it with a little more kindness than they used to do, recognizing some of these things. I think there's been a good improvement on it, but it is often hard to prove, and a he said, she said kind of a situation, but it's really worth making it more than 5 people out of 1,000 to be prosecuted.
Particularly here in Florida, if something like this happens to you and you need to go to Jackson, for example, they do have a facility there that they could take a rape kit and things like that. And you don't necessarily have to report it, but at least that evidence is in, and you have time to make the decision of whether you want to go ahead and move forward with it. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and they're experts at guiding people through that whole process. So the decision to report is not the decision to do everything else. And so, but it does get you a care system.
The majority of the victims are under 30, ages 18 to 34. 54% of the victims are under 30 years old.
Well, let's talk about sexual abuse for children for just a minute, because this is something that also doesn't go reported. And I know for years of doing therapy that people often come in and begin to deal with this when they're in their 30s, when they start having children and they realize, oh, that's what a 5-year-old looks like. You know, that's what an 8-year-old looks like. So how, you know, because maybe since they were 5, they thought somehow they wanted it. It was their fault, something. And when they see their own 5-year-old, they say, that's crazy.
No way. Yeah.
And then they start coming in for therapy. So it isn't reported very often, and it is very damaging for life to have been somebody else's object. You know, these people who are there to protect us and babysit us and coach us and teach us and parent us, and all these people that are there that are supposed to be caring and loving, and then they are using us for their purposes. And there's also often a dynamic there of creating a relationship, or what feels like a relationship. Predators can be very good at creating a relationship first, so the person does feel, and all kids want attention, you know, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? That's all kids. And so when somebody's looking at them and giving them attention, and whether it's candy or attention or a trip to the ice cream store, all those things, those are tempting to kids, but it doesn't mean they want to be abused. It means they want to be a little kid who gets lots of attention and love, like all the other kids in the world, you know.
Yeah. I do have some statistics on this. It's important to talk about. So the statistics I have are from the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. So every 9 minutes, a child protective services substantiates a claim, okay, of sexual abuse. Every 9 minutes. Of all the victims under 18, 2 out of 3 are from 12 to 17. So
that's puberty.
Yep, 66% are for 12 to 17, and 34% are under the age of 12. And then, and this is really one of the hardest things to kind of wrap your heads around, but child victims often know the perpetrator. 93% are known to the victim. Okay, so 34% are family members, 59% are acquaintances, 7% are strangers. So we know these people, they're in our lives, right? We see them, we engage with them. 34 are family members, 34% are family members. Okay, uncles, grandparents.
And we do this stranger danger thing, but not necessarily the who am I letting babysit my kids? And just because they're family doesn't mean they don't have some sinful side of uncontrolled, lust or power that they're using. And we don't want to be so paranoid that we can't enjoy people having access to our children and them being loved by many family members. But we need to be really cautious about too long alone or too close of a relationship or an awkward one. And I think maybe most importantly, noticing when our children change and believing them. I know working in sexual abuse recovery, one of the biggest issues that's almost as hard to recover from as the abuse itself, sexual abuse itself, is the response of family who doesn't believe. That we're not protected, we're not believed, or the victim or the perpetrator is protected because of the family doesn't want it to come out and the secrets and all of that. So those are important things for us to remember.
Yes. And always making sure you know where your child is, who they're with. Mm-hmm. If you don't see your child for a long time in your home, where are they, because a lot of the stories are in the evening times, right? A lot of the stories are, why didn't somebody ask where I was during this time, right? So,
our messages here are: be aware that it's way more common than we wish. Be aware of our kids and their surroundings. Be attuned to their moods changing, depression, withdrawal, other things like that. If this is you and you're listening to this show and you're triggered about your own child and saying, wow, maybe that was abuse, or I've kind of always known, but I've minimized it. Maybe today is the day for you to call for therapy and just clear this out. Just get it out of the closet. Get through it, get past it, let it be true. You're past it. You already survived. You're already good and okay. So you can afford to look at it now and be honest with yourself and with the people you need to be honest with. So we invite anyone who's being triggered by the show to come in. And if those of you who are listening are rationalizing to yourself the things you're doing to people in your family, we want you to know that you are permanently damaging lives. And so you need help too. And at Wellspring, we welcome offenders and victims. And, we're all just people needing healing and forgiveness. So any last thoughts from either of you as we wrap up?
I would say educating our children is really important. I mean, I started telling my kids what the vagina was, what the penis was, all these important names that nobody calls it something else. This is what it is, and nobody touches it, right? Nobody, that's yours. And so I think educating our children from a really young age, 3-4 years old, this is, and as soon as, if somebody ever, you come to me immediately and I, will listen to you. So I think that's important also.
That's a very important message. Yeah. Well, we have so much more to say on both of these topics. I'm feeling it as we speak, but we want our listeners to know that they can go to our website, wellspringmiami.org, look in our blog, and we will have more resources, information, hotlines, websites you can go to that will flesh these things out for you, good books you can read. We will have resources for you available. And so we just want to encourage anyone who's listening to the show through podcast or the radio to find the resources on this. If this is triggering in any way, there's a lot more information to be had at Wellspring and in many other places, and we will refer you to those. So I just want to thank Nicole and Kaara for introducing this topic to us today. It's an important one, and we just want to see people be healed, and we want children and elderly to be protected. So it's time to wrap up, and thank you for joining our show today. This is Wellspring on the Air, because hearts and minds matter.